The breaking point captain stood in the observation deck of the diplomatic vessel Harmony's Promise. Watching the construction crews work on the massive quantum gate, the gate would connect the Outer Rim colonies to the Council's central trade network, cutting travel time from 6 months to mere hours. It was supposed to be humanity's greatest contribution to galactic infrastructure. Sarah had spent 3 years overseeing the project, coordinating teams from 17 different species. She had learned to speak 5 alien languages, had memorized cultural protocols for dozens of civilizations, and had become an expert at finding compromise solutions when technical. Disagreements arose. The gate shimmered with contained energy, its massive rings rotating slowly as technicians made final adjustments. In 2 days, it would activate for the first time. Thousands of colonists waited on the other side, eager to reunite with families they had not seen in years. Sarah felt pride warming her chest as she watched the culmination of so much hard work. Approaching completion, her communication device chirped. It was Commander Raj Patel, calling from the engineering bay. His face appeared on her screen, and Sarah immediately knew something was wrong. Raj never showed fear, but his expression was tight with barely controlled panic. "Captain, we have a serious problem," Raj said without preamble. "The Zenthari engineering team just overrode our safety protocols. They are advancing the activation schedule by 48 hours. Sarah felt ice flood her veins. That's impossible. The resonance calibrations are not complete. If they activate now, the dimensional field will be unstable. "I told them exactly that," Raj replied, his jaw clenched. "They said human caution is excessive. They said our species sees dangers that do not exist because we are not technologically advanced enough to understand the mathematics." Sarah was already moving toward the exit. "Where is Council Overseer Vexter?" "He authorized our timeline," he sided with the Zenthari. "He said the Council cannot wait for human nervousness to subside. The activation happens in 6 hours." Sarah ran through the corridors of the station, her mind racing through scenarios. She burst into the Council Operations Center, where Overseer Vexter loomed over a command console. The Zenthari was nearly 3 meters tall, his crystalline exoskeleton reflecting the light from dozens of monitors. Around him, engineers from various species worked frantically at their stations. "Overseer Vexter," Sarah said, forcing her voice to remain calm and professional, "I am requesting an immediate halt to the early activation. Our safety analysis is incomplete." Vexter turned slowly, his faceted eyes regarding her with something that might have been amusement. "Captain Chen, your concerns have been noted and dismissed. The Zenthari have built 47 quantum gates across the galaxy. We understand the technology better than humans possibly could. Your species has been in space for less than 2 centuries. We have been traveling between stars for 12,000 years. Experience does not make you infallible," Sarah insisted. "The dimensional resonance readings in this sector are unusual. We need more time to understand why. Your people see complications where none exist." Vexter replied dismissively. "This is why humanity remains useful for manual labor and basic coordination. It should not be trusted with technical decisions. We will proceed as planned." Sarah felt anger rising but pushed it down. Anger would not save lives. "Then I am formally invoking Protocol 7. Human personnel are withdrawing from this project until proper safety measures are implemented." The operations center went silent. Protocol 7 was the nuclear option in human diplomatic agreements. It meant complete withdrawal from a project. With all liability transferred to the remaining parties, Vexter's crystalline face somehow conveyed contempt. "If humanity wishes to abandon its responsibilities, that is your choice. You will not be permitted to return when the gate functions perfectly and proves your fears groundless." Sarah gathered her team. 43 human engineers, technicians, and coordinators evacuated the station within 2 hours. They left detailed warnings in the system logs, documented every concern, and transferred all their research data to Council archives. Then they boarded the Harmony's Promise and moved to a safe distance. 6 hours later, the quantum gate activated. For precisely 17 seconds, it worked exactly as designed. Then the dimensional field collapsed catastrophically. The gate tore itself apart in a cascade of uncontrolled energy. The explosion vaporized the station and every ship within 500 kilometers. On the other side of the gate, the colonial outpost of New Horizons simply ceased to exist. 3,000 human colonists died instantly, along with 2,000 beings from other species who lived and worked alongside them. Sarah watched the readings from their safe distance, tears streaming down her face. She had known it would happen. She had tried to stop it, and she had been dismissed as too primitive to understand. The Council's official response came 8 hours later. They expressed sympathy for the loss of life. They promised an investigation, but they also made clear that the incident resulted from unforeseen technical complications that no one could have predicted. They did not acknowledge that humans had predicted exactly this outcome. They did not apologize for ignoring the warnings. Commander Raj Patel found Sarah in her quarters. She was not crying anymore. She was composing a message to Earth. "What are you writing?" Raj asked quietly. "A report to the Human Council," Sarah replied. "Every warning we gave, every time we were overruled, every life that could have been saved if anyone had listened." Raj sat down across from her. He had lost friends in the disaster. 3 engineers who had served under his command, who had trusted him to keep them safe. "What do you think Earth will do?" Sarah looked at him with eyes that had gone hard. "What we should have done years ago. We are going to leave." The message reached Earth 4 days later. It traveled through normal space communication channels, taking time to cross the vast distances between stars. But when it arrived, it detonated like a bomb in the halls of human government. Ambassador Marcus Webb read the report 3 times, each reading making him angrier. Marcus had spent 30 years building relationships with alien species. He believed deeply in the potential for cooperation between different civilizations. He had dedicated his life to helping humanity find its place among the stars. Now he learned that human warnings had been systematically ignored, that human expertise had been dismissed as primitive ignorance, and that 3,000 human colonists had died because the Council valued its own pride more than the safety of beings it considered inferior. Marcus called an emergency session of Earth's Security Council. Representatives from every human colony attended via holographic link. The debates lasted for 3 days. Some argued for military retaliation. Others insisted that humanity should work within council structures to demand reform. But the majority reached a different conclusion. Humanity would withdraw. Completely, immediately. And without negotiation, Ambassador Zara Khalid delivered the message to the Galactic Council personally. She was humanity's chief representative, a woman who had spent 15 years navigating the complex politics of galactic civilization. She had friends among dozens of species, had negotiated treaties and trade agreements, had worked tirelessly to earn respect for her relatively young species. She walked into the affirm chambers with her head held high and her message prepared. The vast amphitheater held representatives from over 2,000 species. Some were humanoid, others were utterly alien, existing as energy beings or collective consciousnesses or forms that defied easy description. Zara had learned to work with all of them. "Honored representatives," Zara began, her voice amplified throughout the mass of space. "I come before you today to announce humanity's immediate and complete withdrawal from all Galactic Council operations, projects, and treaties." The chamber erupted in noise. Some species laughed, thinking it was a negotiating tactic. Others shouted questions. A few remained silent. Perhaps sensing this was different from typical diplomatic posturing, Zara waited for the noise to subside. "This decision is final and non-negotiable. Within 48 hours, every human serving in Council territories will return to human space. We will complete no ongoing projects. We will honor no existing commitments. We will simply leave." Council Speaker Tharan rose from his elevated position. The ancient being's voice carried the weight of authority accumulated over centuries. "Ambassador Khalid, this is highly irregular. If humanity has grievances, there are proper channels for addressing them. We used those channels," Zara replied calmly. "We filed safety reports. We issued warnings. We followed every protocol. And 3,000 of our people died because no one listened. We are done following channels that lead nowhere. You cannot simply abandon your responsibilities, Tharn insisted. There are contracts, agreements, projects that depend on human participation. Watch us, Zara said simply. She placed a data crystal on the speaker's podium. This contains documentation of every project humans are currently involved with. Every timeline, every technical detail, every relevant piece of information. You will have to complete them yourselves. She turned to leave, then paused. For 70 years, humanity has served this council with dedication and integrity. We have built your infrastructure, coordinated your relief efforts, mediated your disputes, and contributed our knowledge freely. And when we tried to save lives, we were told we were too primitive to understand. You will now discover exactly how much you depended on beings you considered inferior. Zara walked out of the chamber. Behind her, the council dissolved into chaos. The withdrawal happened with remarkable speed. Humanity had prepared for this moment, though no one had wanted it to come. Evacuation plans existed for every human outpost in council space. Ships were already in position. Communication networks were ready to coordinate the massive exodus. Dr. Elena Rodriguez, chief medical officer at the council's largest hospital, received her orders while in the middle of surgery. She was operating on a Thelian patient, a delicate procedure that required intimate knowledge of non-human physiology. Elena had pioneered several cross-species medical techniques that had saved countless lives across the galaxy. She finished the surgery, ensuring her patient would survive. Then she gathered her team of 40 human doctors and nurses. They packed their personal belongings and their research notes. They left detailed instructions for continuing treatments for the hundreds of patients currently under their care. And then they left. The hospital administration did not realize the scale of the problem until human doctors failed to report for the next shift. Then they discovered that every human medical professional in the facility had departed. A hospital that served 50,000 patients daily suddenly had 1/3 fewer doctors. Engineer Thomas Imbeck worked deep in the infrastructure networks beneath Unity Station, the council's administrative heart. Thomas and his team of 200 human technicians maintained the environmental systems, power grids, and data networks that kept the massive station functioning. They worked in shifts around the clock, solving problems before most beings even knew the problems existed. Thomas received the withdrawal order and immediately began shutdown procedures. His team did not sabotage anything. They simply stopped working. They documented current system status, left access codes for emergency overrides, and walked away from machinery they had kept running flawlessly for decades. Within 6 hours, minor system failures began appearing across Unity Station. Within 12 hours, 3 major power grid failures caused blackouts in residential sections. The council's own technicians rushed to address problems, only to discover that human engineers had been handling 5 times more issues than anyone realized. Solving most problems before they became visible, across the galaxy, similar scenes played out. Human agronomists left experimental farms on 40 worlds. Human navigators abandoned their posts on trade vessels. Human teachers stopped instructing classes at interspecies academies. Human researchers packed up decades of work from collaborative laboratories. Human diplomats closed their embassies. They did not leave in anger. They did not sabotage or destroy. They simply stopped doing the work they had been doing. Work that no one had fully appreciated until it ceased. The council's initial response was dismissive. Speaker Thon issued a statement expressing disappointment in humanity's emotional reaction to an unfortunate accident. He assured the galaxy that council operations would continue smoothly. He suggested that humanity would return once cooler. Heads prevailed. He was wrong on every count. The unraveling 3 months after humanity's withdrawal, Ambassador Kira Okonkwo sat in her office on Earth, reviewing reports that painted an increasingly dire picture of galactic civilization. Kira had been humanity's assistant diplomatic coordinator, working behind the scenes to support the more visible ambassadors. Now she had been tasked with documenting exactly what was happening in council space since humans departed. The reports were worse than anyone had predicted. Kira organized them into categories, trying to make sense of the chaos. What she found was a civilization slowly tearing itself apart because no one had realized how much invisible work humans had been doing. The first major crisis emerged in interstellar trade. Captain Devon Armstrong had been one of 300 human navigators working for various shipping companies. Devon had spent 12 years mapping safe routes through the complex. Gravitic anomalies that made faster-than-light travel possible. He could calculate jump coordinates in his head, adjusting for variables that other species needed computers to process. When Devon and his fellow human navigators departed, the shipping companies assumed their own navigators could handle the work. They were wrong. The Zenthari navigators were mathematically brilliant, but lacked intuitive feel for the subtle variations in spacetime. The Keltorian navigators had the experience but processed information too slowly for real-time adjustments. The artificial intelligence systems were powerful, but could not adapt to truly novel situations. Within 6 weeks, shipping losses increased by 40%. 3 major vessels simply vanished during jumps, taking their crews and cargo with them. Dozens more emerged from jump space far off course, requiring expensive rescue operations. Trade routes that had functioned smoothly for decades became unreliable. Insurance costs skyrocketed. Companies began canceling long-distance shipping contracts. The economic ripples spread quickly. Worlds that depended on imported food faced shortages. Factories shut down for lack of raw materials. Medical supplies failed to reach remote colonies. The Council tried to reassign existing navigators to critical routes, but there simply were not enough skilled beings to cover the routes that human navigators had been handling. The medical crisis emerged even more dramatically. Dr. Samuel Okafor read the reports from Theron 7 with growing horror. A plague had broken out on the industrial world, affecting multiple species simultaneously. The disease crossed species barriers in ways that should have been impossible. Without proper treatment, mortality rate was approaching 60%. Theron 7 had hosted a major medical research center, where human doctors had worked alongside alien colleagues. Studying cross-species diseases, Dr. Helena Santos had been the center's director, a brilliant physician who understood the complex interactions between different biologies. When Helena departed, she left detailed research notes and protocols. But her alien colleagues discovered that understanding the research and applying it in crisis situations were vastly different skills. The Theron 7 plague shared characteristics with diseases from 3 different species. Human doctors would have recognized the pattern immediately, having studied Earth's own history of pandemic diseases. They would have known to look for vectors that cross species boundaries. They would have understood how to adapt treatments designed for one biology to work on another, without human expertise. The local medical teams struggled. They tried treating each species separately, not realizing the pathogen was mutating as it jumped between hosts. They used standard protocols that proved ineffective. They consulted databases that could not account for the unprecedented nature of the outbreak. By the time they requested emergency assistance from Earth, 30,000 beings had already died. Samuel drafted a careful response. Humanity would provide medical consultation and supply shipments, but only through direct bilateral agreement with Theron 7's government, completely outside Council structures. The message was clear. Humans would help those who asked directly, but they would not return to a system that had dismissed their expertise. Agricultural failures compounded the growing crisis. Dr. Yuki Tanaka had been humanity's leading working on 18 different worlds to help alien crops thrive in non-native environments. Yuki had spent 20 years learning the intricate relationships between different species' agricultural systems. She understood that Keltorian grain needed specific fungal partners to grow properly. She knew that Vrin fruit trees required precise day-night cycles that varied by orbital position. She could diagnose crop diseases by subtle changes in color that most beings could not even perceive. When Yuki departed, she left extensive documentation. But documentation could not replace experience and intuition. On the agricultural world of Harvest Prime, the Council's replacement agronomist followed her written instructions precisely. The crops failed anyway. What the instructions could not convey was the need to adjust fertilizer composition based on subtle variations in soil conditions, or how to recognize the early signs of pest infestation before they became visible to scanning equipment. Across 40 worlds, similar failures occurred. Crop yields dropped by 20 to 50%. Worlds that had been food exporters became food importers. Prices for basic agricultural products tripled. Hunger became a real threat on worlds that had not worried about food security in generations. The Council convened emergency sessions to address the cascading crises. The debates were heated and increasingly desperate. Various species blamed each other for the problems. Some claimed the failures proved humanity had been secretly sabotaging systems before they left. Others insisted the problems were temporary, that Council species would adapt and improve. Without that infrastructure, the Council's value proposition collapsed. Species began asking what they were actually getting from Council membership. Some started negotiating bilateral agreements outside Council structures. Others began withdrawing from Council obligations, hoarding resources for their own populations. The most dangerous development was the growing military tension. The Council had maintained peace, partly through its overwhelming military power, but also through diplomatic relationships that made war seem unnecessary. Human mediators had been quietly managing dozens of border disputes, ethnic tensions, and resource conflicts. They had prevented small disagreements from escalating into armed conflicts. Without those mediators, old grudges resurfaced. The Xanthari Empire and the Keltorian Federation had been rivals for centuries, kept in check by carefully negotiated agreements. Those agreements began breaking down as misunderstandings proliferated. Neither side actually wanted war, but neither side could back down without losing face. The situation drifted toward conflict because no one present had the diplomatic skills to find a face-saving compromise. Dr. Amara Usay reviewed intelligence reports, indicating that 17 different regional conflicts were escalating toward violence. Amara had been a human military liaison before retiring to academic work. She understood how wars started, and she recognized the warning signs. They are sleepwalking into catastrophe, she told her colleague. Every species involved would prefer peace, but no one knows how to achieve it. Human diplomats would have been mediating these disputes constantly. Without them, momentum toward conflict becomes unstoppable. The breaking point came on Unity Station itself. Engineer Kwame Adebayo read the incident report with grim satisfaction at the disaster, but at the final proof of what he had been warning about for years. Unity Station experienced a cascade failure in its environmental systems. The failure started small, a malfunction in air recycling for one residential section. It should have been isolated and repaired within hours. Instead, it cascaded through interconnected systems, spreading to adjacent sections. Within 12 hours, 40% of the station lost life support. Hundreds of thousands of beings evacuated to emergency shelters. The Council's engineering teams worked frantically to restore systems. They discovered that the problem was not a simple malfunction, it was the accumulation of dozens of minor issues that had been developing for months. Human maintenance crews had been constantly monitoring systems, fixing small problems before they became large ones, compensating for the gradual degradation that affected all complex machinery. Without humans, those small problems had accumulated. The Council's engineers were competent, but they had been focused on major visible issues. They had not realized that Unity Station required constant background maintenance at a level far beyond what they had been providing. The station was stabilized, but the message was clear. If even Unity Station, the Council's pride and administrative center, could not function reliably without human engineers, what did that say about the thousands of other facilities across the galaxy? Ambassador Kira Okonkwo compiled her reports into a comprehensive assessment. The picture was devastating. In 3 months, humanity's withdrawal had revealed that humans had been supporting 73% of the Council's critical infrastructure. Not because humans were assigned this work, but because humans had consistently volunteered for necessary tasks that other species found tedious or unrewarding. Human doctors had staffed understaffed hospitals on remote worlds because they believed everyone deserved medical care. Human engineers had taken over night Maintenance shifts because they understood that preventing problems was better than fixing them. Human teachers had developed cross-species educational programs because they valued knowledge sharing. Human diplomats had mediated minor disputes because they knew small conflicts could become large wars. They had done this work quietly, without demanding recognition or special privileges. And the Council had taken it completely for granted. Kira presented her findings to Earth's government. The Human Council read the reports in silence. The evidence was irrefutable. Galactic civilization was unraveling because no one had realized how much it depended on human contributions. "They are suffering," one council member observed. "Should we not offer assistance?" Marcus Webb, now serving as Earth's foreign minister, shook his head. "They're not suffering because we abandoned them. They're suffering because they never valued what we provided. If we return now, they will never learn that lesson. The galaxy needs to understand that cooperation requires mutual respect." "How long do we wait?" another member asked. "Till they ask properly," Marcus replied. "Not with demands or entitlement, but with genuine recognition of what partnership means. Until then, we focus on our own worlds and help those who approach us directly as equals." The decision was made. Humanity would maintain its withdrawal. The galaxy would have to learn its lesson the hard way. The reckoning 6 months after humanity's withdrawal, the Galactic Council stood on the brink of civil war. Ambassador Kira Okonkwo watched the situation deteriorate from her office on Earth, tracking developments that would have seemed impossible a year earlier. The carefully constructed edifice of galactic civilization was crumbling, and no one seemed able to stop it. The Zenthari Empire and Keltorian Federation finally went to war. The conflict started over a mining dispute on a border asteroid, the kind of disagreement that human mediators had resolved hundreds of times before. Without mediation, both sides postured aggressively. Pride became more important than pragmatism. Ancient resentment surfaced. Within weeks, the two powers were exchanging fire across 3 star systems. The war was devastating not because of the battles themselves, but because of what it represented. These were 2 of the Council's most powerful members, species that had cooperated for centuries. If they could fall into war this easily, what hope did the galaxy have for maintaining peace? Other species began choosing sides or declaring neutrality. The Council's authority collapsed as members prioritized their own security over collective governance. Trade networks fragmented along factional lines. Scientific collaborations dissolved as species withdrew behind defensive borders. The age of galactic cooperation was ending. Dr. Marcus Webb watched these developments with deep sadness. Marcus had retired from active diplomacy, but remained an advisor to Earth's government. He had spent his entire adult life believing that different civilizations could work together, that the barriers between species were not insurmountable. Now he watched that dream falling apart. "Could stop this," Marcus said during an advisory council meeting. "Human mediators could negotiate a ceasefire within days. Every day we wait, more beings die." Foreign Minister Amara Osei met his eyes with sympathy but determination. "Marcus, you know why we cannot simply return? The Council dismissed our expertise and got people killed. If we rush back to save them now, they learn nothing. They will take us for granted again within a generation. So we let the galaxy burn to teach them a lesson," Marcus challenged. "We let them face the consequences of their choices," Amara replied. "That is not cruelty. It is the only way true change becomes possible." The turning point came from an unexpected source. Council Speaker Tharn, who had presided over the Council for 3 centuries, did something unprecedented. He resigned. His resignation speech was broadcast across the galaxy. The ancient being's voice carried defeat and wisdom that came from painful learning. "I have served this Council for longer than many species have been spacefaring," Tharn began. "I believed our civilization represented the pinnacle of galactic achievement. I was wrong." The admission sent shockwaves through the Council chambers. Beings who had served under Tharn for decades listened in stunned silence. When humanity joined the Council 70 years ago, I saw them as young and naive, Tharn continued. Their insistence on peaceful resolution seemed idealistic and impractical. Their constant emphasis on cross-cultural understanding seemed unnecessary in a civilization as advanced as ours. Their warnings about safety protocols seemed like excessive. Caution from a species still learning to navigate the stars. He paused, and the weight of his next words fell like hammer blows. I was catastrophically wrong. Humanity was not naive. They were wise in ways we had forgotten. They did not emphasize cultural understanding because they were unsophisticated. They emphasized it because their own history taught them that diversity without understanding leads to destruction. They did not issue excessive warnings. They issued necessary warnings that we were too arrogant to heed. Tharn's lights flickered in a pattern that conveyed profound regret. 3,000 beings died because I dismissed human expertise. Millions more suffer now because this council failed to recognize what humanity contributed. We treated them as useful servants rather than valued partners. We are now learning the cost of that arrogance. I resign my position effective immediately. The council requires leadership that can acknowledge its failures and build something better. I am too bound by old thinking to provide that leadership. My final recommendation is that this council formally request humanity's assistance, not as a demand from the powerful, but as a plea from the desperate. And when humanity responds, if they choose to respond at all, we must listen to them. Tharn's resignation created a power vacuum that forced the council to confront its dysfunction. The debate over his successor revealed deep divisions. Some species wanted to continue as before, insisting the problems would eventually resolve themselves. Others demanded fundamental reforms. A few suggested dissolving the council entirely. Into this chaos stepped Ambassador Vera of the scholarly communion. Virus species were renowned for their academic achievements and careful analysis. They had been among humanity's closest allies. Having recognized early that human approaches to problem-solving offered valuable perspectives, Vera proposed forming a special commission to formally document humanity's contributions and analyze what went wrong. The proposal faced resistance from species who did not want their failures examined publicly, but enough council members recognized the necessity that the commission was approved. The commission worked for 6 weeks, interviewing thousands of beings across hundreds of worlds. They compiled testimony from alien doctors who had worked alongside human physicians, engineers who had coordinated with human technicians, teachers who had collaborated with human educators, and diplomats who had negotiated with human mediators. The final report was devastating in its comprehensiveness. It documented that humans had been involved in 94% of successful conflict resolutions over the past 50 years. They had coordinated 82% of disaster relief operations across the galaxy. They had maintained 73% of critical infrastructure systems. They had pioneered 67% of successful cross-species medical treatments. The report went deeper, explaining why humans had been so effective. It documented Earth's history of diversity and conflict, showing how humanity had learned to bridge profound differences within its own species. It analyzed human cognitive patterns that made them naturally suited to cross-cultural communication. It revealed the extensive training programs that human diplomats underwent, programs far more rigorous than equivalent training in most other species. Most damning was the section documenting how the council had systematically dismissed human expertise. It listed hundreds of instances where human warnings were ignored. Human protocols were overridden, and human recommendations were rejected. In case after case, the subsequent outcomes proved humans had been correct. The Commission's conclusion was blunt. The Council's treatment of humanity represents the greatest diplomatic and practical failure in recorded galactic history. We elevated our own pride above the safety and prosperity of trillions of beings. We mistook our technological advancement for wisdom and our age for understanding. We failed catastrophically. Dr. Marcus Webb received an unexpected communication request. It came from Ambassador Vera personally, not through official council channels. Marcus accepted the call with cautious curiosity. Vera's image appeared in his office, the alien's complex facial features showing clear signs of distress. Dr. Webb, I am contacting you as a colleague and friend, not as an official representative. I need your honest assessment of whether the council can be salvaged. Marcus considered carefully before responding. Ambassador, that depends entirely on whether the council is willing to fundamentally change. Not superficial reforms, but genuine transformation of how it approaches governance and cooperation. What would that transformation require? Vera asked. True partnership, Marcus replied. The Council operates on a hierarchy where older, more technologically advanced species dominate. That structure guarantees that wisdom from younger species will be dismissed. You need a system where every voice carries weight based on merit and contribution, not age and technology. The powerful species will never accept such changes, Vera said quietly. Marcus smiled sadly. Then the Council will continue collapsing until they have no choice. Catastrophe often succeeds where reason fails. The catalyst for change came from the war itself. The Xanthuricultorian conflict had been raging for 3 months, with casualties mounting into the millions. Both sides were exhausted but could not find a path to peace without losing face. The stalemate was becoming a meat grinder that would bleed both civilizations dry, a coalition of mid-tier species, led by Virus Scholarly Communion, made a desperate decision. They bypassed the Council entirely and contacted Earth directly. Their message was simple and honest. We were wrong. We need help. We are asking not as the powerful, demanding service from the weak, but as colleagues requesting assistance from experts we should have valued all along. Earth's government debated the request for 2 days. Some argued that not enough time had passed for real learning to occur. Others insisted that beings were dying and humanity had an obligation to help. Foreign Minister Amara Osei broke the deadlock with a proposal. We will provide assistance, but on our terms. We will mediate the Xanthuricultorian conflict and help stabilize critical infrastructure failures. In return, the Council must implement fundamental reforms that give all species genuine voice and governance. We return as equal partners or not at all. The offer was transmitted to the Council with a 48-hour deadline for response. The debate that followed was the most heated in Council history. Xanthari representatives argued that accepting human terms would set a dangerous precedent. Keltorian leaders, desperate to end the war bleeding their civilization dry, pushed for acceptance. Dozens of species split along various fault lines. In the end, pragmatism triumphed over pride. The Council accepted humanity's terms by a narrow vote. The reforms would proceed. Humans would return. Dr. Sarah Chin found herself back at Unity Station 1 month later. She had been the captain who witnessed the Quantum Gate disaster that triggered humanity's withdrawal. Now she was leading a team of human engineers tasked with stabilizing the station's failing systems, walking through corridors. She had left 6 months earlier, felt surreal. The station showed visible signs of neglect. Systems that should have been humming efficiently stuttered and groaned. Maintenance panels hung open, revealing hasty repair work. The air itself tasted of recycler strain. Sarah's team worked for 72 hours straight, identifying and correcting the accumulated problems. They did not work alone. Council engineers assisted, watching carefully and asking questions. The dynamic had changed. Where before alien engineers had dismissed human methods as primitive, now they observed, with genuine respect and desire to learn. Why do you check these secondary systems so frequently? A Xanthar engineer asked Sarah as she inspected a power coupling that readings suggested was functioning normally, because functioning normally is not the same as functioning optimally. Sarah explained, this coupling is operating within acceptable parameters, but it is developing microfractures that will cause failure in about 3 months. If we replace it now, we prevent a crisis. If we wait until it fails, we face emergency repairs during a critical moment. The Xanthari engineer examined the coupling himself, his sophisticated scanners confirming Sarah's assessment. How did you detect this? My equipment shows green status, experience and intuition, Sarah replied. Your scanners measure current function. I am looking at degradation patterns that predict future failures. It requires understanding how systems age under stress. The engineer was silent for a moment. We have been reactive, fixing problems only when they become critical. You work preventatively. Exactly, Sarah confirmed. It is less dramatic but far more effective. This is what human maintenance crews were doing constantly before we left. We were preventing hundreds of small failures that would have cascaded into major crises. Similar scenes played out across Unity Station and throughout Council space. Human specialists returned to their fields, but this time accompanied by eager students from various species. The dynamic shifted from humans doing the work while others ignored them, to humans teaching while others learned. The peace negotiations between the Zenthari Empire and Kaltorian Federation took 6 weeks. Ambassador Zara Khalid led the human mediation team, working with representatives from both powers. The process was difficult and painful, requiring both sides to acknowledge their mistakes and find compromises that satisfied their fundamental needs without humiliating either party. Zara employed every technique in humanity's diplomatic arsenal. She built personal relationships with key figures on both sides. She helped each party understand the other's genuine concerns beneath the rhetoric. She found creative solutions that allowed both sides to claim victory while actually addressing the underlying disputes. She was patient through setbacks and persistent when either side wanted to quit. When the final peace treaty was signed, it did something remarkable. It satisfied both parties genuinely, not through imposed terms, but through negotiated understanding. Both the Zenthari and Kaltorians walked away feeling their concerns had been addressed and their dignity maintained. The Kaltorian Prime Minister addressed the treaty signing ceremony with unexpected candor. For 3 months, my people fought and died in a war that should never have happened. We blamed the Zenthari for our conflict. We blamed each other for the stalemate. We should have blamed ourselves for allowing pride to override wisdom. The humans showed us how to find peace while preserving honor. We will not forget this lesson. The treaty became a model for resolving other conflicts across the galaxy. Human mediators, working now as respected partners rather than dismissed servants, helped stabilize 17 regional disputes within 4 months. They did not impose solutions. They facilitated understanding that allowed species to solve their own problems. The Council's reforms proceeded with surprising speed once the immediate crises stabilized. The governance structure was overhauled to give meaningful voice to all member species regardless of age or technology. Voting weights were adjusted to account for actual contributions rather than simple military power. New institutions were created to ensure expertise was valued over seniority. Most significantly, the Council established the Office of Cross-Species Understanding. Headed by Dr. Helena Santos, human physician who had directed the Medical Research Center on Theron 7 before the withdrawal. The office's mandate was to facilitate communication and cooperation between different species. Drawing on lessons humanity had learned from managing its own internal diversity, 1 year after their withdrawal, humanity held a ceremony at Unity Station to formally recommit to Council participation. The event was attended by representatives from across the galaxy, but the tone was completely different from humanity's original welcome ceremony 7 decades earlier. Ambassador Zara Khalid addressed the assembly with quiet dignity. When humanity first joined the Council, we came with hope and idealism. We believed different species could work together for mutual benefit. That belief was tested severely when our warnings were dismissed and our people died. We withdrew not in anger, but because we could not be part of a system that valued pride over safety. She paused, meeting the eyes of representatives from dozens of species. Today, we return, but we return changed. We no longer approach this council with naive hope. We approach with realistic understanding of how difficult true cooperation is. We will contribute our expertise gladly, but we will also insist on being heard when we speak. We will work alongside you as partners, but we will not accept being treated as servants. The past year has been painful for everyone. Species have suffered from failures that could have been prevented. Lives have been lost in conflicts that should have been mediated. Infrastructure has collapsed that should have been maintained. These are real costs, and we do not minimize them. But perhaps these costs have purchased something valuable. Perhaps the galaxy has learned that cooperation requires mutual respect. That wisdom comes from many sources. That technological advancement does not automatically confer understanding of all things. That sometimes the youngest voices speak the truest words. Zara's voice grew stronger as she concluded. Humanity returns to help build a better council. Not the old council where power determined truth, but a new council where truth determines legitimacy. We invite every species here to join us in this work. The galaxy can be what we hoped it would be, but only if we are all willing to learn from our mistakes. The response was not applause or formal votes. It was something more meaningful. One by one, representatives from across the council stood in their species' gesture of respect and acknowledgement. The Xanthari, the Keltorians, the scholarly communion, dozens of others, each acknowledging in their own way that the message had been received and accepted. Dr. Marcus. Webb watched from Earth via holographic feed. Tears ran down his face as he saw the galaxy finally understanding what he had tried to teach for decades. The cost had been terrible. Thousands had died. Millions had suffered. But perhaps, just perhaps, the lesson would last. Beside him, Foreign Minister Amara Osei placed a hand on his shoulder. You were right all along, Marcus. Sometimes the only way to teach is to step back and let the consequences unfold. Marcus nodded slowly. I just wish we could have found a less painful way. Perhaps there was no other way, Amara replied. Some lessons can only be learned through suffering. The question now is whether they will remember. They watched as the ceremony concluded, and beings from 1,000 worlds mingled, speaking to each other with new understanding and respect. Human diplomats moved through the crowd, no longer working in isolation but collaborating with colleagues from dozens of species. The galaxy had been shaken to its foundations. It had faced its failures and barely survived. But it had survived, and in surviving it, had changed. The council that emerged from the crisis was not the same institution humanity had left. It was something new, something that might actually live up to the ideals that had inspired its creation. On Unity Station, Captain Sarah Chen stood at the same observation window, where she had watched the quantum gate construction so many months ago. The view was the same, but everything else had changed. She was no longer a captain whose expertise was dismissed. She was now chief engineer of infrastructure, working alongside a council of experts from various species who actually valued her knowledge. A Xanthari engineer approached her. It was the same being who had questioned her preventative maintenance methods weeks earlier. Captain Chen, I wanted to thank you personally, he said in carefully practiced human diplomatic protocol. Your team has taught us more in 1 month than we learned in the previous year trying to manage systems on our own. My species has built technology for millennia, but we had forgotten that building and maintaining are different skills. Sarah smiled. Your species has taught us as well. Your mathematical models for predicting structural stress are revolutionary. By combining your theoretical knowledge with our practical experience, we are developing maintenance protocols more effective than either approach alone. This is what partnership should be, the Xanthari agreed. Not one species dominating others, but different strengths complementing each other. They stood together, human and alien, watching ships arrive and depart from Unity Station. Each ship carried beings from dozens of worlds, all working together to rebuild what had nearly collapsed. The work would take years. The scars would last longer. But the foundation was stronger now, built on hard-learned lessons rather than comfortable assumptions. In the meditation gardens of Unity Station, a monument was being constructed. It bore the names of the 3,000 humans and 2,000 other beings who died in the quantum gate disaster. Beneath the names was an inscription written in every major galactic language. Here are remembered those who died because wisdom was dismissed and warnings were ignored. May their sacrifice teach all species that expertise deserves respect regardless of its source. That caution is not weakness, and that pride must never override safety. Let these names remind us that cooperation requires humility, that understanding requires listening, and that true strength lies not in domination, but in learning from those different from ourselves. The galaxy had learned its lesson. The cost had been terrible, but the lesson might last. Humanity had withdrawn quietly, forcing the Council to face judgment. In facing that judgment, the Council had finally learned what humanity had tried to teach all along. Different species could work together, but only through genuine partnership built on mutual respect. The silent exodus had ended. The real work was just beginning.